and this is Straight Talk. Vocal and controversial, my guest tonight speaks his mind about anything and everything to do with Nigeria. He says of himself that he's misrepresented and misunderstood, but his critics say he has a penchant for hogging the political limelight, ensuring that he's always talked about and therefore relevant ahead of every election. A lawyer, poet, and essayist, my guest was born into privilege and had all of his education in the United Kingdom. His first degree was at the School of African and Oriental Studies, University of London, while his postgraduate studies took place at the University of Cambridge, a school attended by both his father and grandfather. My guest's first political appointment was as Chief Press Secretary to Mr. Tom Ikimi, the first national chairman of the National Republican Convention. Since then, he's held many other political appointments, including ministerial positions in the government of former President Olusegun Obasanjo. My guest is in court with the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, the EFCC, who accuse him of misappropriation of funds during his tenure as aviation minister, charges he has denied. Originally a member of the ruling People's Democratic Party, the PDP, he fell out with the party and defected in 2013 to join the opposition. But his time there proved short-lived, as he has since defected again and returned to the ruling PDP. On Straight Talk today, I am pleased to have with me Mr. Femi Fani Kayode. Thank you so much for being a guest on Straight Talk.
Thank you.
Right. You were with the PDP last year.
Yeah.
You defected to the APC, and now you're back in the PDP. How is life in the PDP?
Well, the PDP is more or less a family, and I'm glad to say that I'm glad to be back within that family. I was in the PDP not just last year, but I've been in the PDP since 2003, when I joined President Obasanjo's government. It's been a little bit up and down in terms of my relationship with some of those that have held positions of power and authority within that party or within governments that were formed by that party. And probably that's one of the reasons why I moved across and went on sabbatical, as it were, for 1 year and joined the opposition. But now I'm happy to be back within the family, and all is going well.
Do you feel like you've been almost like the prodigal son who sort of went off and now is back and has been accepted into the fold?
I wouldn't quite put it like that, though it's a lovely way to put it. But if it were as simple as that, we'd all be very happy and we'd have a happy ending. We pray we do have a happy ending, but it's not really that simple.
Why isn't it that simple?
Well, there were issues, very serious issues that needed to be looked at and needed to be considered.
What were those issues?
Well, there were a number of issues, concerning the way in which the country was run or was being run post-Obasanjo. It didn't just start in the last couple of years. There were a number of us that were within the government with Obasanjo. When we left, we felt that there were issues in terms of the ability of the person that came in after that, that's President Umaru Yar'Adua, to set the country in the right direction in accordance with what we believed the PDP should stand for.
Now, many people will look at what you've done and describe it as flip-flopping, moving from one place to the other, and not really understand the basis of those decisions that you make, especially because the central figure of the PDP, because of the way Nigeria is organized, is the president. And that person is still the same person that was there last year when you left, a person that you've been very, very critical of, and you've sort of accused of a whole lot of things. In your mind, has President Jonathan changed?
If you go back a little bit, my main criticism against this government, right from the start, about 3-4 years ago, was that we needed to be much harder on the Islamists and on Islamic terror and on terror in any shape or form. And I thought they weren't doing nearly enough. And of course, I was proved right because the matter became a major issue. They started to do that. I'm glad to see that, and I believe he's got that right today. Secondly, the issue of Yoruba representation, which for me is very, very important. I view myself, and I believe that I'm a Yoruba nationalist. I have no apology for that. And I believe that this country is based on the premise that every nationality, every religion, must be on an equal footing and on a level playing field. And I believe that this government, up until fairly recently, was not being fair to the Yoruba people.
With all due respect, let me quote you some of the things you said about the president, which have nothing to do with security. This is you speaking in January 2014, this year, less than 6 months ago, 7 months ago. Approximately 2 weeks ago, President Goodluck Jonathan retired and a Course 18 general of the Nigerian Army, who was Chief of Army Staff, and replaced him with a Course 25 simply because he wanted an Ijaw man to head the army. How desperate and wicked is this son of Otueke that he feels that he must destroy the careers of senior army and police officers and retire them prematurely just to ensure that his own Ijaw brothers control our army and police. And all this simply because he wants to remain in power beyond 2015, and he wants the guns and the bullets to vote for him and keep the people in line. Described this same president, son of Otueke, desperate and wicked. Your words.
Yeah, fine. My words. I was in the opposition at the time. Since that time, I've had the privilege to sit down with a number of people within the villa, within the government, to see clearly, and I'm fully convinced that perhaps that was not the appropriate thing to say concerning the military. He had his reasons, and those reasons have been explained to me. And I'm very comfortable with the situation that we're in now.
Do you feel you were wrong about him?
Well, I think that it was appropriate to make the necessary criticisms at the time.
No, but these were quite specific criticisms.
Sure. I believe that they were valid criticisms at the time, and I needed further evidence of the fact that I may not have judged him correctly. That evidence was provided to me at a later stage, and I realize now that perhaps, I ought not to have been so harsh, because some of these decisions were taken based on information that we knew nothing about, not being in government and not being close to government at the time.
Now, what I'm hearing you saying is that you feel maybe you could have been more measured, and so have you learned lessons about being measured now?
No.
Because you don't have information?
I have no regrets whatsoever about any criticism I've made about President Goodluck Jonathan, President Umaru Yar'Adua, President Olusegun Obasanjo before I got close to him, or any other president since I joined politics 25 years ago. I think it's legitimate and appropriate for people to express their views based on the information that they have.
The man that you now know since rejoining the PDP as president, what is he like from your point of view?
So I see far more focus than before. I see that he's far more purposeful than before, and I believe that he's far more committed. Things are changing. Boko Haram is being fought head-on right now, and I'm pleased about that. The people of the Southwest have good representation within the government. I'm pleased about that. And I believe, by and large, that the opposition is not the kind of opposition that ought to be able to come in and sweep him out of power and take power. And to that extent...
Because you're no longer with them.
No. Because...
Well, that's what it sounds like.
I wish I had that much... I wish I had that much... I wish I attached so much value to myself. Not at all. I think that from their own utterances and from their own records, the way they operate, it's very clear to me that the PDP is the better alternative. And that's the mistake that I made. I think the error of judgment that I made, perhaps, was to have opted to go and join a group of people that I feel really are not ready to hold power at the federal level at this point in time. And once I realized I made that mistake, I retraced my steps and I went back.
Now, are we likely to see you in the future retrace your steps again back to the APC? Because, if information comes again and you find out you've been wrong about them, is there a possibility that you're wrong about the APC?
It's not,
You've been wrong about other things before.
No. It's not a question so much of information. It's a question of the ability to run the country. Jonathan has shown in the last, at least as far as I'm concerned, in my own view, that he is able to change, retrace his steps, and run the country in a far more effective manner than he had been doing previous to that time, in my own view. It's just my judgment, it's just my opinion. I also believe that the APC are not the sort of people that ought to hold power at the federal level. And I can come to that later if you want me to. But for me, to be chopped, I don't flip-flop. I make choices and decisions.
On the outside, optics. The optics look like you are someone who goes this and then goes that way.
Not at all. They've read me wrongly. Look at my record. I've been consistently within, unlike others, and I might add, the vice president changed parties 5 times in the space of 4 years. El Rufai was in the PDP government before. He's gone to APC. Ribadu has come back and gone again, and so on and so forth. A lot of people do this. I did it on one occasion. I went to the APC. After 1 year, I quickly went back to the PDP, and I criticized the PDP from within for at least 4 years before leaving them, unlike most people who left at the drop of a hat.
How much of the fact that the president, you say, has changed and is now governing properly got to do with the 2015 elections?
It's got a lot to do with it. I believe that an election year is approaching, and he probably realizes himself that he has to do a lot better. He has thrown his hat in the ring, so to speak, though he hasn't formally declared. But it's very clear to me that he's committed to doing a lot better, and he has indeed been doing a lot better than before. And I'm quite comfortable with that. Now, it's left for those of us within the PDP and that support his government and his presidency to convince others that he's done enough to warrant a second term. And I think that's what we're all working towards now.
I'm going to take a quick break.
Sure.
When we come back, we speak to Mr. Fani Kayode about the Osun elections and what it feels like to have lost his state rather than win it for his new party. Join us after the break.
Wow, you play so well now.
I want to be just like Don Jazzy.
Oh, really?
Milk for you boys?
Thanks, Mom.
Thank you.
You know, he even drinks Loyal milk every day, too.
How do you know that?
Let me show you. He's out there. Let's go play.
Hi. You want to play?
Calcium fortified Loyal milk nourishes the body and helps to build stronger bones. Now that keeps my family active every day. That's why I made the switch to Loyal milk. You too can make that switch. Loyal milk, it's what's inside that matters.
Welcome back. Mr. Fani Kayode, prior to the break, you were talking about the PDP, the party that you now belong to, and talking to me about all the reforms that you think have taken place and all the changes that made the PDP attractive to you again. You, nonetheless, failed to deliver Osun State during the recently concluded elections for governor to the PDP. Has that been an issue?
Well, I don't think so. Like I said elsewhere, you win some, you lose some. And we had a very good election. The PDP managed to win 42% of the votes cast, and that's exceptionally good. We had a damn good candidate. We had immense support from people from outside the state within the party. And I think we did exceptionally well. I might add there are issues that have been raised because the candidate has chosen to go to court, citing all kinds of electoral malpractices as his reasons. Well, these matters will be presented before the court, and we'll see what the court says within 3 months. But I
know
think we
for
did
a
very
fact
well.
that you were in Osun.
Sure, I was there for 3 weeks
So were
before the
these
election.
free and fair elections? Is there a case for election malpractice from your point of view, or do you endorse these elections?
No. For me as an individual, I can only comment on what I witnessed and what I saw. And I said it immediately after the election that I felt that it was a convincing election. And I felt that Aregbesola had won fair and square. However, I didn't see everything. I only saw what I saw in my own zone and on the day of the election, though I was in the state for almost 3 weeks before. Now, issues have been raised about electoral malpractice in Ede, in Elisha, and in a number of other places. And it's for the courts to decide, and it's for our candidate and our party. And I'm a party man. I have to stand by my party at such a time. It's for us, our party at the state level, to present their case before the court to see whether or not things went well.
Now, my understanding is that actually all is not well in paradise because there are people within the party that are very upset with you, particularly the state chapter of the PDP, not only because they feel that you didn't, if you like, deliver, but also because you rushed to congratulate the sitting governor and basically gave him legitimacy, and also called him your brother, apparently, in the message that you sent.
He's my brother. Rauf Aregbesola is my brother, and he will always be my brother, regardless of the fact that we're in different political parties. And really, I couldn't give a hoot what anybody thinks or has to say about that, because for me, politics should not, and does not divide brothers and friends. We just disagree in terms of our party ideology and where this country should be going. You spoke about delivering. At least in my own zone, in my own area where I come from, we delivered the 4 local government areas of Ile-Ife convincingly. We got the highest number of votes for Yola Omishiri, who is also from there, I might add. And we did very, very well there. We got 42% of the votes cast in the state. So the suggestion that the APC or any of the leaders of the APC are the ones that speak for the Yoruba people, which is what they always tell everybody that cares to listen, has been put, to the test, and it's simply not true. Almost 50% of our people, not quite, but almost 50% of our people voted for the PDP, and that, I think, is something we should be happy about, and we should not be disputing that you shouldn't congratulate or you should congratulate. We're beyond that. We're leaders, and we need to be able to do the right thing at the right time.
Now, it's a little bit strange to hear you refer to, one of the leading lights of the opposition APC as your brother and your friend, a party that you've described as the founders and sponsors of terror and Boko Haram. I see a contradiction in that, don't you?
No, I don't, and I'll tell you why. When I speak about the APC, I'm not referring to every individual in the APC. I'm not referring to every person in the APC. I'm referring to some individuals in the APC that have taken leading role, that play a leading role at the national level of the APC. And that's where my concern resides. I don't believe, for example, for 1 minute, that somebody like, let's say,
Rauf
Aregbesola,
who is a Muslim.
Yeah, he's a good Muslim. He carries his faith into whatever he does, and he's entitled to do that. I don't believe that he, as an individual, is somebody that will support or will encourage or fund or speak for Boko Haram.
And you believe within the APC there are people who speak for, fund for, and support?
Well, I'll go as far, on this program, I'm prepared to say that going to Aregbesola, he's never said anything that is pro-Boko Haram. As a matter of fact, he has opposed Boko Haram quite vocally over the last couple of years. But there are others within the party that have spoken up for Boko Haram, and I judge them based on the utterances that they make.
Let's be specific. Who? Names.
Okay, let me be specific. For example, last year, while speaking to Radio Liberty, the leading presidential aspirant for the APC, General Muhammadu Buhari, said clearly and categorically that an attack against Boko Haram was an attack against the North. He also said that the Boko Haramites ought to be treated in the same way as the Niger Delta militants. They should be taken care of, they should be given allowances, they should be granted amnesty, they should be negotiated with, and so on and so forth, rather than for the army to go in and bomb their homes and kill their people. He said in 2001 that he had the intention of spreading Sharia throughout the country. He also said in 2001 that what business is it of Christians to cut, why should Christians or any non-Muslims be bothered when Muslims cut each other's limbs off? After all, it's their faith. Now, I don't want to judge him by that, because that was in 2001. But when you marry that with his comments about Boko Haram last year, and when you marry that with the comments of Lai Mohammed, who is the official spokesman of the APC, at that time when he made these comments, he was the official spokesman of the ACN, that the prescription of Boko Haram by the federal government was unconstitutional and that it was unjust. When you marry all that, and you marry that with the activities of the governor of Borno State, as far as I'm concerned, when it comes to the Chibok affair and so on, and unexplained acts, when you marry that with the activities of Senator Ndume and other senators, leading senators from the Northeast, when it comes to the issue of Boko Haram, it gives cause for concern. And I'm saying that they need to answer these questions and explain to us.
Well, when these issues have been raised again and again, there is a tendency, I've been told by people who have interviewed, in the course of this program for these things, that people who say you need to understand the root causes of Boko Haram are seen as apologists for Boko Haram. Are you not making the same mistake?
Not at all.
Just because someone says, respect the rule of law, work by the Constitution and do what the Constitution, says you should do, like Lai Mohammed says, and says that, terrorism is not something that happens overnight, and you need to look at the reasons why we have terrorism so that you're using what this government is actually doing, which is the soft power as well as the hard power. Why should that come together to mean that this is a sponsor of terror?
What it does is that it allows those of us that listen to these comments to raise issues and raise questions about the intention of these people. Now, for example, when a terrorist organization that has killed, probably more people than any other terrorist organization on the planet today within the space of 1 or 2 years. I mean, as at last year when Mohammed made these comments, they had killed almost 10 to 15,000 Nigerians, although we always underplay the numbers, okay? Both Christians and Muslims. And then they are prescribed by the federal government. And then the official spokesman of the opposition says it is wrong for them to prescribe them and it is unjust. That raises questions, and it ought to raise questions. A party that has a national executive today where the chairman happens to be a Christian, but the overwhelming majority of substantive office holders are Muslims, that is key positions, not deputy, are Muslims, gives cause for concern. A party, if you go to Lagos State, for example,
Mr. Fani,
I can come to Lagos State in a minute.
I understand you saying a party... Let me finish. Okay. I understand you saying a party that has too many Muslims, for example, is not necessarily nationally representative and may therefore not be qualified to run for and aspire to hold national office. That is quite different from saying this is a party that is sponsoring terror, that is funding terror. And I'm just saying that, for the sake of clarity, I want to be sure of exactly what it is that you are alleging when it comes to the APC.
Let me be more specific. First of all, there are certain things that I probably would not want to say on this program. Because it would simply implicate too many people.
Don't you have a responsibility to Nigeria?
No.
If you know something...
There's nothing I would say that I would have said here that I have not made available to the relevant security agents. And they already know everything anyway.
So why haven't we seen arrests?
The issue is simple and clear. Well, simply because probably, I don't know, probably ask them, but the issue would probably be, if they start picking up people like Buhari just like that, you know what's going to happen in this country.
Let me take a quick break. When we come back, we speak about the letter that President Obasanjo wrote to President Jonathan and ask what Mr. Femi Fani Kayode thinks of its contents. Don't go away. Welcome back. If you have evidence, that there are individuals who are funding terror, who are paying Nigerians to blow up other Nigerians and kill them and commit murder and mayhem, why is it that you've not made that evidence public or taking it, to the authorities and they use it to make arrests?
Okay, let me put it to you like this, okay? I judge them by their utterances, the way they behave. Now, I'm saying to you clearly and categorically that my belief, my view based on what I've seen and what I know, is that one, the APC is a party with an Islamist agenda that believes in the Muslim cause, that uses religion to play politics, which is very dangerous, and that it has within its ranks, many of its leaders, its most notable figures and leaders, have a clear warm spot or soft spot for Boko Haram based on what they have said. I'm also concerned about the activities of some of their senators who seem to know when Boko Haram are about to bomb and when they're not about to bomb, who said they knew where the girls were. I'm also concerned about the utterances of their official spokesman. Now, based on that, I make my assertion and my allegation. I also say this, that the leaders of the APC may not be violent men, but as far as I'm concerned, they represent an Islamist cause, and they have some kind of symbiotic relationship with Boko Haram, who also are prepared to put the gun where their mouths are and effect that cause by the bullet.
Your evidence is their utterances and
my
the things
evidence is
said.
The fact that they have publicly sympathized and spoken up for Boko Haram on a number of occasions.
Do you have
some of their leading figures.
Do you have evidence of, say, funding Could it be that the reason we haven't seen any prosecution is that actually there's no evidence? And there's no evidence because this is really just not true. This is all politics.
Well, I can assure you clearly and categorically that Boko Haram could not have gone as far as they have gone had there not been an element of collusion from within elements within the political class. I have no doubt about that. They've gone too far. They've done too much damage. They're very focused in their thinking.
And
they
in your
obviously
view,
have
this
support.
political class all reside within the APC?
I would say the ones that I am aware of. I've told you the one I'm not aware, the PDP one I spoke out, just as I spoke about the APC ones. When it was the PDP, and the one I heard, the one I listened to, when he said they're freedom fighters, that was the chairman of the PDP, Alhaji Bamangochukwu. I took him up on it. Only 2 people in this country did, the president of CAN and myself. And I did that, and the man is no longer chairman of the PDP. Perhaps what the APC should do, if they want us to shed our suspicions, is to begin to think twice about the type of spokesman they have, the type of presidential aspirants they have, and so on and so forth. That might allay our fears. But as long as these people remain there, as long as they continue to play key roles within that party, and as long as they continue to say the sort of things they've said in the past, we have every right to raise questions. And I maintain it, and I'll say it again. And they have an Islamist agenda, and I stand by that.
Let's move to something else. Let's talk about leadership and the things that perhaps make someone either a good leader or a bad leader. President Obasanjo versus
My Oga.
your current Oga.
Well, President Obasanjo is my Oga.
As well, and
but
the
President
current
Goodluck
president
is my president. Yes, of course.
Right.
Sure.
Where, if you're weighing the two of them in terms of the way they lead, the achievements, etc., how would you rate them?
Well, President Obasanjo is an extraordinary man, and he's somebody that has his own way of handling issues and handling matters. And of course, I have immense respect for him. I've criticized him on a number of occasions, both before I joined his government and after I left his government. It's not everything I agree on with him, and most of the time I don't speak because he's my Oga and he'll always be my Oga. But sometimes I do disagree with him publicly. I believe that the style of President Goodluck Jonathan is completely different, and perhaps these are one of the things we didn't take into consideration before. We thought perhaps the only way forward is to continue with President Obasanjo's head-on style of doing things. But that's not the only way to get things done. So they're very different, and it would be very unfair for me to compare them. In some respects, Obasanjo is so much stronger and so much better. In other respects, Jonathan is
You're doing
better.
the sitting on the fence thing.
Not at all.
Yes,
you
you
know,
are.
I'd always speak my mind. Jonathan is a far more gentle person than President Obasanjo. Obasanjo is very forceful. And he has strong will, strong political will. He gets things done. He doesn't have time for rubbish.
Now, when you
Jonathan,
say...
on the other hand, is gentle. He's a little bit slower. But that doesn't mean he's any less purposeful. And I think that perhaps for this time in the development of our nation, you might need to have somebody that's a little bit more gentle and a little bit more meek than somebody that's too, but equally purposeful than somebody that's too strong-headed and abrasive and so on and so forth. Now, I may be wrong, but I think it would be unfair for me to compare them. They both have their weaknesses. They both have their strengths.
Now, they had a very public spat recently with the president, former president, writing an open letter in which he made some damaging allegations against our sitting president. What did you make of that letter?
Well, that's interesting because at the time the letter was written by President Obasanjo, we spoke on the phone, and I asked him, the following day, look, how serious is this? And he assured me that everything he had written was 100% correct. And you
believed him at the time?
Of course, because at that time, if you remember, I came out publicly saying, look, if this is true, then we really have a problem in this country. And I spoke out forcefully, supporting President Obasanjo, saying, look, if this is true, if people are listed to be killed, the president has to stop this nonsense and has to get it right. Since that time, I have done my own homework, I have got closer to these people, and I've recognized the fact that I don't believe that these are the sort of people that draw up hit lists and kill people. That is my own judgment, that is my own view, based on what I know. Now, I don't want to condemn President Obasanjo. I don't want to say he's right or wrong. All I'm saying is that I differ in my view. And I also believe that perhaps it was an error on my part to have simply accepted all that he said at that time.
Mr. Fani, there's a pattern. I put it to you. we've sat down here and we've talked for quite a number of minutes. And with a few things you've said to me, perhaps I was wrong, perhaps the information that I had, now that I'm close to these people, now that I know more than I know. And so, would you say that perhaps you're too quick to jump into
Not
things if you're now admitting to multiple errors of judgment?
There's no multiple error of judgment here. We spoke about Obasanjo, and I told you that I do not believe this president or this government has a hit list. I also told you about the issue of APC. These are the two areas I think I make.
No, the quote on President Jonathan as well. You said
I didn't say that.
You said you've gotten closer to him, and you've sort of now understand why the army.
We must get to a point in this country where leaders are prepared to say, "Listen, I said this or I did this. Perhaps it wasn't the right thing to do." You see, what?
So you were wrong on a number of occasions.
But of course, nobody's infallible. I mean, everybody makes errors of judgment and mistakes. Everybody. The difference between me and most people is that once I accept the fact or I see or I have better knowledge or understanding of the situation, I will retrace my steps very, very quickly. People are always too quick to judge others. I can assure you that the most difficult decisions that some of us have had to make is whether or not we're going to stay or leave. I spent five or 6 good years within the PDP before I left, managing it from within, screaming from the top of every roof. They were saying that I wasn't being fair to the party. I did so from within. Nothing changed until after I left. And then after I left, things began to fall into place and people began to sit up. And of course, some of the issues that I raised were addressed. And I went back. That's the right and proper thing to do. And I can speak just for myself. We're motivated by conviction, by our passion for the country, and for the fact that we believe this country deserves the very best of leadership, not a cult-like type of leadership that accepts everything the leadership of any political party or any government does.
It's time for a quick break.
You may wonder why I switched to layer milk. Well, I got hooked after my fitness trainer told me about the good stuff inside. You should try it.
Exercise and making good nutrition decisions like drinking calcium-enriched loyal milk every day is vital because it helps you nourish your bones and body so that you can live a more active life every day.
That's why I encourage my clients and ensure that my family gets their loyal milk too.
So, make that switch to calcium-fortified loyal milk because it's what's inside that matters.
Welcome back.
Okay.
What's the status of your case with the EFCC?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, the matter is almost over. We've been on it for almost 7 years now. They started with preferring charges against me on the 19.5 billion intervention fund. Then they realized that the intervention fund had been pillaged before I got there, and I was one of the people that actually exposed the crime, and they dropped all charges on me and charged other people. Then it went into some other issues, and at the end of the day, they came up with charges of what they described as money laundering and so on and so forth. Initially, they said 200 million, then they said 99 million, and now, from what I understand, because they've closed their case, they're talking about they have evidence of, I think, 2.5 million, which they claim was money was laundered. Now that's where we are. They've closed their case. We're about to make a no-case submission, go to court ourselves to say there is no case to answer. And I'm glad that it's almost coming to an end.
The general consensus is that it looks like the EFCC will be more or less withdrawing their case and saying they have no case. There is suspicion that there's a link between, let me finish, between the fact that the EFCC is now withdrawing their case and the fact that you're now back into your family fold of the PDP.
I have been fighting this matter for 7 years. When I was in the PDP, and when I was outside of the PDP, and now that I'm back in the PDP, there's no question of withdrawing any case. I wouldn't even want them to withdraw a case. This case was dead from the start. If people cared to come to court, they would see there was no evidence of any wrongdoing. It was political persecution from beginning to end, orchestrated by individuals. Some are dead, some are still alive. Some are within the corridors of power. Some are outside the corridors of power now. We know who they are. And for me, I learned a lot from this, that you need to be extra careful with people and always assume that nobody's your friend, because people always assume the worst. The good news is that as far as I'm concerned, this matter has almost ended. They are not withdrawing any case. They have presented their case as best as they can. They have been fairly consistent. They didn't withdraw charges, because if they had withdrawn charges when I came
what
back...
I understand is they're not bringing in any witnesses, and that is deliberate.
They have closed their case. But what I will tell you is that no deals were done. There is no question of withdrawing any case. There is no question of being soft on me. The matter was prosecuted to the full extent of the law, and the matter has almost come to an end. And at the end of it all, we'll present a no-case submission. And I believe it will be thrown out after that.
Now, finally, I want to ask you, what place do you think ethnic nationalism has to play within a wider Nigeria? Because you make a big deal of the fact that you're Yoruba, you make a big deal of the fact that you are a Yoruba nationalist. Is there room for people to be ethnic nationalists?
I think there is. I mean, there are two worldviews about this. My view is that there most certainly is, and I don't think you can create an artificial state without any form of foundation. You know, I see myself as a Nigerian, all well and good, and I'm proud of Nigeria. I've defended Nigeria, I've represented Nigeria, and I will always do so as long as Nigeria exists. However, within the context of Nigeria, I see myself as a Yoruba man, and I pride myself on the history of the Yorubas, politically, culturally, in terms of education and faith and so on and so forth, our tolerance, our liberalism. I think these are virtues that I'm very proud of. Does that mean I don't believe in Nigeria? No. What it means is this, that I believe every single ethnic nationality in this country, whether it be Fulani, Hausa, Igbo, or whatever, or including my own people, the Yorubas, ought to have equal representation, equal rights, and ought to be allowed to operate within, on a level playing field in the wider Nigerian space. And I believe that it would be wrong for us to relegate anyone to being second-class citizens.
Listening to you talk, one would assume that indeed the Yorubas in Nigeria are second-class citizens, and actually, on the contrary, they are part of the big three. You know, the big three, because, you know, there are other minorities in Nigeria that have, if you like, a better claim to being oppressed, to being marginalized, etc., etc. And yet, in your politics, you always seem to be bringing up this issue of the Yoruba.
It's not just my politics, it's the politics of people like Chief Awolowo, people like Chief Bola again, and virtually every key Yoruba leader, including my late father, including S.L. Akitola, all of us, believe, and I'll tell you the view that I think holds sway in the Southwest. I don't speak for the Yorubas, but let me just tell you what I think many Yorubas feel, rightly so in my view, is that had it been that we were allowed to continue to develop at our own pace, we would have gone much further than we have gone in this country. The assertion and the allegation is that we have been held back. We have been held back in terms of political development, the economy, in terms of education, and so on and so forth.
But you've gone further than any other tribe in the country.
That's because we were so far ahead before.
Exactly.
That's because we had. That's because we were so far.
And so it's very hard to sort of take your issue of being marginalized, being held back, when you are clearly head and shoulders above the Igbos, the Hausa Fulanis, the Ijos, you know, the Tiv, because, you know, Nigeria is made up of so many other groups.
Believe me, we would have gone so much further had we been allowed to develop at our own pace. And apart from that, look at what happened in the past. The perception is that Awolowo was stopped from being president because he was a Yoruba man. Abiola was stopped from being president and killed because he was a Yoruba man. You have to remember the June 12th thing. You have to also remember when Obasanjo came in, he refused to play the Yoruba card, some say rightly, and he treated everybody as being equal. When Yar'Adua came in, he set all that back, turned on our people again. That's the perception. And when Jonathan came in, the same thing happened until very, very recently. We are very sensitive about this. And we
control the economy.
No, we control the economy.
You've had, you know, leadership positions at the highest, you know,
I agree
positions.
With you.
There are tribes who cannot even
the top 20
claim
positions,
to this.
The top 20 positions in this country as we speak today. There is only one position that's filled by a Yoruba man, and that's the chief of staff in the villa. And I thank God for that. Now, that's not the fault of the PDP.
You've got ministers.
Every state has a minister.
Yeah.
No, that's not enough. Every state has a minister. But if you have the top 20 positions in this country today, the reason why I might add, and I should say this in fairness to the president, to the government, that we don't have a Yoruba man as number 4 is because the leadership of the APC traded it off and gave it to a Fulani person who is there now. We would have had at least number 4. But the fact remains remains. The fact remains
the fact that
top
the
20
president,
positions, we
the
don't have,
president
apart
didn't
from
make
the
an
chief of-
appointment, and yet you want to blame the opposition.
No, the president.
That's what it sounds like.
No. The position of Speaker of the House.
Oh,
is
you're
not
talking
an
about
appointment.
the Speaker.
The
Okay.
Speaker is not an appointment. Our own people threw it
But
away.
that is
that is a fair assertion. The APC, Bola Tinubu, they threw that away and gave it to somebody else. So that's nobody's fault but ours. However, we could have had a number of other key appointments within the top 20. Well, I'm glad to say that in the last few months, we have a Yoruba man who is right at the center of power now. That is General Aborifa, who is Chief of Staff, and that's a good thing. That's one of the reasons why so many of us are excited about the PDP now.
If someone like you, you know, we talked about the sort of pedigree that you have, the sort of upbringing you've had. If someone like you still wants to, a certain extent, put tribe out there in terms of national politics and appointment, is there really hope that we will ever get to a Nigeria where actually where you come from is less important than who you are, what you do, your character, and the way you carry yourself?
We are a nation, not a tribe. That's the Yorubas. Now, secondly, we are a nation that we believe have been shortchanged by Nigeria ever since this contraption was established.
There's no evidence of that. You're the ones doing better than everybody.
There's plenty of evidence of it. We would have gone so much further had it not been for the fact that in terms of development, in terms of the economy, we would have gone. But that is not even the issue now. The issue now is you spoke about what kind of background I'm supposed to come from. It's because I have that kind of background that I'm sensitive to the fact that my people don't feel too happy in a situation whereby, all the time it appears that we are being treated in a way that we should not be treated. We have been marginalized.
Isn't the answer...
We have been treated badly. We were treated badly under successive governments, and and unless we stand up for our rights, we'll continue to be treated badly.
Isn't the answer really to build a Nigeria where you come from is not relevant to how well you do?
That is the ideal.
Isn't that the ideal? And isn't it the responsibility of leaders such as yourself to make the ideal the reality?
That is the ideal, but we all know that it will not happen in the near future. Let's be frank with ourselves.
So let's stick to nationalism.
Let us respect the fact that we are different in many ways, but at the same time, accept the fact that we can come together, regardless of our differences, to move our country forward. It's simple and clear.